Welcome everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land from where I'm recording today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. My name is Christina Lee and I'm a senior lecturer here in the Literary and Cultural Studies program in the Faculty of Humanities at Curtin University. I'm also the chair of the organising committee for the annual Year 12 English and Literature Conference. While we couldn't welcome you all face-to-face at Curtin this year, it is my great pleasure to be presenting this lecture topic of reading film as a multimodal text. I hope it will be a useful tool that will help you in your studies, and I encourage you to pause this lecture whenever you need to take notes, and also to think about the questions I'm going to pose. While the focus will be on films, the terminology I'll be using can be applied to other multimodal texts. Before I define multimodality, I'm going to show you a clip and I want you to answer these two questions. Question 1. What genre would this film fit into? Question 2. What details about the narrative and characters can I deduce from this scene? So let's watch the clip now and make sure you hit pause afterwards.
Come to Singapore. I want the whole island to meet the brilliant Rachel Chu.
Aww. In that clip, there was a lot of audio and visual information that helped you construct meaning about the genre and the story. We can safely say that this film fits into the romantic comedy genre. The two central characters are obviously in a romantic relationship, and we can tell that by their close proximity to one another, their body language, their actions, and the dialogue. When Nick says to Rachel, "Come to Singapore, I want the whole island to meet the brilliant Rachel Chu," we can tell that this is a serious relationship and that this guy is head over heels for her. But, as with all romantic comedies, love is a rocky road. We get the sense that this relationship is going to be tested. Straight away, we can see that Nick's network in Singapore is full of highly judgmental and gossipy people. This is apparent from the flurry of activity in social media, where Rachel is a target of criticism. Someone draws horns and facial hair on her photo. There's sad and angry emojis that Nick is bringing her to a wedding. And the text messages show people's jealousy and deep disapproval of her. Someone calls Rachel a loser, and another says they hate her, ! Despite never having met her before. Even though there's nasty and nosy characters in this scene, there's also a lightness to it that identifies the film as romantic comedy. The soundtrack is upbeat jazz, the animations are playful, and we read the text messages as being ridiculous and over the top. The scene is also fast-moving with quick edits and fun transitions that match the mood of the music. As the audience, we're encouraged to have a laugh and not take it too seriously. You'll also notice how bright, colourful and glamorous the settings and costumes are, which we often associate with romantic comedies because they involve a degree of fantasy and wish fulfillment. That exercise required you to analyse the scene by drawing on your knowledge of the language features and techniques of film, as well as the conventions of genre. you had to explain how the construction of that scene influenced the meaning you made from it. And that is also what you need to do in your English assignments and exam whenever you talk about multimodal texts. So, what is a multimodal text? According to the Year 12 English syllabus, a multimodal text involves a combination of two or more communication modes, for example, print, image, and spoken text, as in film or computer presentations. Film is multimodal because it involves viewing images, listening to audio, and reading written text. Film involves different communication processes. In that clip I showed you from the 2018 film Crazy Rich Asians, we constructed meaning from the images, including the graphics, from the audio, specifically the dialogue, sound effects, and music, and also the written text, such as the text messages, the Google search, and the words on the map. And we put all of those elements together to arrive at an interpretation of not only that scene, but also the greater narrative. Other multimodal texts include television, documentary, computer games, graphic novels, book covers, movie posters, podcasts, and so on. I should add that if you haven't already, do make sure you're working closely with the syllabus document, because it contains everything you need to know to demonstrate your competency in Year 12 English. The English exam can only assess your material that appears in the syllabus. There are opportunities to talk about multimodal texts, including film, in your English exam. In Section 1, Comprehending, at least one of the unseen texts will be a visual text where you'll draw on visual language features and terminology. In past years, these unseen texts have included photographs and also book covers. In Section 2, Responding, you can discuss a film as one of your studied texts. Whether you're writing an assignment or sitting an exam, I can guarantee that you will never be asked simply to retell a story or describe an image. The crux of a strong response is analysis and explanation. Analysis and explanation will show your grasp of syllabus concepts as well as higher order thinking. According to the 2019 Good Answers ATAR English Guide, the meaning you have made from any one text is not as important as your understanding of how and why you made that meaning. And by meaning, we're talking about representations of people, events, issues, and subjects, and also your interpretation of a text. Now, the how and why is asking you to show your awareness of how you arrived at that meaning. And to do that, you need to consider context of production and reception, as well as the construction of the text. And when we talk about construction of a text, we're heading into the territory of language features, techniques, and also conventions of genre, for instance. More on that shortly, but I do want to quickly say something about context. You may have noticed that free-to-air television was showing films like these back in March and April this year. Contagion, Outbreak, World War Z, San Andreas, The Day After Tomorrow, 2012, those were just a couple of them. Now this, of course, wasn't coincidental. In March and April, we witnessed the worldwide impact of COVID-19 and the peak in hysteria. Infection and death rates were rising at an alarming rate. Governments were scrambling to devise pandemic plans to avoid an impending health crisis. International borders shut down. Economies came to a grinding halt, and people's behaviours became desperate. And we saw that with panic buying. In this unprecedented moment in contemporary history, no one really knew what was going on or how to respond. Now, not all of the films on the slide are about deadly viral outbreaks. San Andreas, The Day After Tomorrow, and 2012 are about natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis. But what all of those films do have in common is the theme of crisis on a global scale. The fact that they were being repeatedly screened on television was indicative of the main social concerns of that time. It was telling us something about the context of reception, the context of our culture. If you watched any of those films, ask yourself, why? Perhaps those end-of-world scenarios allow us to vicariously experience disaster without ever really being put into harm's way. Perhaps they offered us a way of getting our heads around seemingly incomprehensible cataclysmic events. Or maybe we wanted to watch things that we could identify with, and that was a collective fear and anxiety about the state of the world. The phrase social distancing may have become part of our shared vocabulary in recent months. But when one of the characters refers to it in the 2011 film Contagion, it's hard not to think, I'm living this film right now. As I've just shown in relation to disaster films, films have an important social and cultural function. They can reinforce the dominant representations and ideologies of a society, but they can also challenge or subvert them. Films can make us reflect and think critically about our own values, attitudes, perspectives, and experiences. When it comes to writing well about film, you must draw on the language features that are specific to this form, that is the visual, audio, and written. And you need to discuss the techniques, the stylistic choices made by the filmmakers. And just a reminder, we can apply these language features to any multimodal text, not just film. The categories in these tables will help you organize your thoughts and provide you with the meta-language to write concisely and analytically about film. On the right-hand side are useful terms. Now, you don't need to commit all of them to memory, but you should familiarize yourself with a good number of them and be able to use them competently. Having said that, avoid a checklist mentality. The key to writing a compelling response, whether it's a short answer or an essay, is not the sheer number of things you can cram in. It's much more effective to focus on a select few techniques and terms and go into them in depth. So let's work through these categories now. Editing is how the shots are coordinated or put together. They show relationships between objects and characters, and they provide transitions between settings and time periods. They can also enhance the mood. For instance, a series of quick cuts may create drama and tension, such as in action sequences. A long, uninterrupted take can also build tension, but it does this through prolonged suspense. A montage sequence can show the passage of time, while a jump cut may be used for an intentionally jarring effect on the audience. Camera techniques is also referred to as cinematography. It refers to how an image is photographed and framed, and we could talk about things like framing, angle, distance, focus, camera movement. Cinematography would constitute part of what the syllabus refers to as visual elements or visual language, so the visual components of a text. A close-up of someone's face might be used to register the intensity of their emotion. A shallow depth of field may be used to draw our attention to an in-focus object while the foreground or the background is blurred. A low camera angle might be used to simulate the point of view of someone who is closer to ground level, gazing up at someone towering over them, which might show power relations at work. The camera might zoom in to an object of interest. Mise en scène, which is French for putting into the scene, is basically everything that's placed in front of the camera to be shot. Mise en scène includes setting and props, costumes and makeup, lighting, and the actors. Mise en scène is not just about what you put in the frame, but also how they are arranged. In other words, the composition within the frame. Hard lighting creates dark shadows and severe lines in a scene, while soft lighting produces a romantic, gentler effect. If you place two characters at opposite ends of a couch, this physical distance, or this proximity, can indicate emotional distance between them. An object may be a motif in a narrative that develops into or explains a central theme, and a motif is anything that is recurring. If a character's house is full of paintings and replicas of skulls in a film, what does the skull motif suggest? And for a masterclass in symbolism and motifs, you should check out Jordan Peele's 2017 horror film Get Out, if you haven't already. Sound includes dialogue, voiceover, sound effects, and music. Sound enhances mood and provides information to the audience. So compare the effect of the upbeat soundtrack in Crazy Rich Asians with the ominous musical score of Jaws. The voiceover of a narrator may divulge secrets to the audience that the characters are not privy to, while dialogue can provide insight into the psychological state of characters. The written language techniques for typography is the written text that's added in post-production. And it too can also provide us with information, such as the passing of time, telling us, for example, that 5 years has gone by. And it can also tell us about the genre of the text, among other things. For instance, the intertitles in a Victorian Gothic narrative might have really ornate lettering, while a sci-fi narrative will have minimalist font. I want to go into mise-en-scène and framing a bit more. In the following film stills, pay attention to the way I talk about how the language features and stylistic choices influence the meaning I make. This image is from the 2019 film Parasite. The meaning I make is that these characters are poor, and I am positioned to read this as a suffocating space. But that's only part of the answer. I need to explain how and why I arrived at that interpretation, and I need to provide evidence from the text. And this is where I can delve into the specific details of mise-en-scène and camera techniques a bit more. Everything in this medium shot is arranged to enhance a feeling of claustrophobia. The characters are huddled together in this restricted space, wedged between a toilet and a wall cluttered with toiletries. This claustrophobia is emphasized by the tight framing itself. There's not much space around the characters within the frame. Despite the mobile phones they're holding, and the mobiles are props, we deduce these characters belong to the lower class because they're crammed together in this tiny, filthy bathroom. Even the drab color scheme of the setting and the characters' clothes, the costumes, implies dirtiness and poverty. Compare this to the other house that is featured in the film that makes obvious the economic disparities between the classes. Wealth here is indicated by the mise-en-scène, the sleek, modern lines in the architecture and furniture, the minimalist aesthetics, the wide open space. While the previous image is a representation of messiness, overcrowding, and griminess, this setting conveys luxury, orderliness, and cleanliness that borders on being sterile. On an earlier slide, you would have seen the rule of thirds appear under camera techniques. The rule of thirds is a useful concept to have in your vocabulary. The rule of thirds is a basic composition in photography where you split the frame up into thirds horizontally and vertically, and this creates 9 frames. And conventionally, you place your subjects along the lines or intersections for a visually interesting shot. And here's an example from Mad Max Fury Road. Now, even if an object is not placed along the lines or intersections, the rule of thirds provides us with a way of thinking about and talking about the placement of objects within the frame. Let's study this image from the 2015 documentary Sherpa, directed by Jennifer Peter. What is the effect of this composition? Well, the person is located smack bang in the center of the frame. Does this mean they are the most important element? I would say no. Why? Well, in this long shot, the person is dwarfed by their surroundings. The visual metaphor is that human beings are small in the grand scheme of life and in the world, and that nature is sublime, it's awe-inspiring, but also terrifying. Notice the rope. It appears to be attached to whoever is holding the camera, and this invites the audience to take on the perspective of one of the climbers and to bear witness to the awesome power of this environment. The leading line draws our attention past the climber, towards the horizon, again reinforcing the sheer expanse of this landscape. When discussing language features and techniques in film, it's crucial to pay attention to what else is happening in the frame or in the scene. You've got to be careful of generalizing. For instance, an object or character in the center does not always mean it is the most important thing, as we've just seen in the image from Sherpa. And the color red does not always symbolize love. These two images are action shots, and they appear similar in terms of composition. Do we read them the same way? No, we don't. The mise-en-scène and facial expressions produce different effects. The first image from the Netflix series The Society gives the impression of terror, of people fleeing from something dangerous. We can tell that from their facial expressions, but this is also conveyed by the aggressive red lighting. There's an element of horror to this scenario. The second image from Avengers, Infinity Wars, gives the impression of defiance and courage, of people running towards danger, like they're going into battle. We can see that by their steely determination. Now, this comparison between these two images shows how you need to be aware of the bigger picture, rather than relying on any one rule to determine your interpretation of that text. When you're studying films, focus on specific scenes. You are not required to remember the entire film and every single scene. So choose scenes that illustrate key themes and issues in the narrative that will allow you to discuss syllabus concepts and also language or textual features. The last concept I'd like to talk about is convention. According to the Year 12 English syllabus, a convention is an accepted practice that has developed over time and is generally used and understood. In film, we often talk about conventions of genre. Film genres tend to have similar plot patterns, character types, themes, film techniques, and recognizable iconography. So you could easily differentiate between a Western and a romantic comedy. Now, when you subvert the conventions of a genre, it can be a powerful way of challenging dominant ideologies and representations. So let's put the key ideas from the lecture together, using District 9 as a case study.
Yeah, because after last year's corporate, my wife was always encouraging me, She said, no, you did fine in the corporate. I was a bit nervous. This little guy, hello, sorry. That's nice, eh? Yeah. Nice background with the people there. We are here at, must I look?
Yeah, just look straight into the lens, right?
We are here at MNU Head Office, Department of Alien Affairs. My name is Wikus van der Merwe. And behind me you can see other Alien Affairs workers. And what we do here at this department is we try to engage with the prawn on behalf of MNU and on behalf of humans.
Now, to everyone's surprise, the ship didn't come to a stop over Manhattan or Washington or Chicago, but instead coasted to a halt directly over the city of Johannesburg. The doors didn't open for 3 months. It just hovered there. Nobody could get in. And they eventually decided, after much deliberation, that the best thing to do would be to physically cut their way in.
We were on the verge of first contact. The whole world was watching. Expecting, I don't know, music from heaven and bright shining lights.
There's a lot of moisture in here. Good, just go slowly. Oh my God.
The creatures were extremely malnourished. They were very unhealthy. They seemed to be aimless. There was a lot of international pressure on us at the time. The entire world was looking at Johannesburg, so we had to do the right thing. The government then established an aid group that started to ferry the aliens to a temporary camp that was set up just beneath the ship.
We didn't have a plan. There was 1 million of them. So what was a temporary holding zone soon became fenced, became militarized, and before we knew it, it was a slum.
Well, the truth is, nobody really knew what this place was. There's a lot of secrets in District 9.
At first, a lot of attention was given to giving the aliens proper status and protection.
They're spending so much money to keep them here when they could be spending it on other things, but at least they're keeping them separate from us.
I want to be realistic with everyone. The aliens will not be able to go home.
The aliens are here to stay.
There were literally thousands of different theories as to why the ship seemed inoperable. And what was speculated was that a command module had detached itself from the main ship and then somehow mysteriously become lost.
Did it fall by itself, or was it programmed? I don't know. Examination of the old video footage shows very clearly that a piece falls from the ship.
We look further on. We look everywhere. This piece is falling off that vessel for bloody months, mate.
Were more energy weapon caches found? The Special Task Force conducted raids in District 9.
Where there's a weapon, there's crime. Tensions rose, and people became more and more fed up, and eventually the rioting started.
Residents in Tembisa rioted for the third consecutive night in an attempt to remove all the aliens from their township.
District 9, which was produced in 2009 and directed by Neil Blomkamp, belongs to the genre of sci-fi action. But interestingly, it's set in contemporary times in South Africa, in the universe that we all inhabit rather than some futuristic galaxy far, far away. District 9 explores xenophobic attitudes towards others who are not like us. And when I say not like us, it's because of their appearance and therefore the assumption that they do not share our values. The film critiques policies of segregation that are born out of fears of the other, which in this case are alien beings from another planet. The film came out in 2009, in a time when there was great distrust of minority groups, and race-based divisions still run deep in South Africa, even after the abolition of apartheid in the early 1990s. The distinctions between us and them are represented through the language features in the clip that involve visual, audio, and written elements. So the aliens obviously look different. There's something insect-like about them. They are also constructed as savages, and we see footage of them hacking up meat in quite barbaric ways, and also in altercations with the locals, who are the civilized humans. In interviews, the aliens are referred to as prawns, which further dehumanizes them. Now, this label of prawns strips their identities of anything resembling humanity and humanness. Comments by interviewees show the deep suspicion and resentment towards the aliens. One local says, "They are spending so much money to keep them here when they could be spending it on other things, but at least they're keeping them separate from us." There is not only social separation, but also physical separation of the aliens from the rest of human society. The environment that the aliens inhabit is a heavily surveilled slum. The helicopters, military personnel with weapons, and barbed wire around the zone conveys how the aliens are seen as a threat, and this justifies their detention. You'll have noticed that this opening scene simulates the conventions of documentary and news stories. There's the shaky handheld camera work and the grainy footage, which gives the scene an unscripted feel, like it's being shot on the fly rather than in a professional studio. The authoritative voiceovers of reporters offer objective information. There's interviews with locals and experts, a sociologist, an aid worker, an engineer, and scholars. Now, we recognise these as interviews because of how they are framed, so medium close-ups of individuals speaking to someone off camera, presumably the reporter. There's written text on the screen also, the names and titles of people, the news station logo, timestamps on the footage. And all of these we understand as authenticating the facts being presented to us. The scene has flat lighting and realistic looking settings and props. In fact, the film was shot in an actual squatter camp in Soweto in Johannesburg. My question to you is, why construct the opening scene like this? Well, so it looks and sounds like real life. So it has the appearance of realism. District 9 is making intertextual references to South Africa's long history of racial segregation and discrimination, as well as more contemporary issues surrounding illegal immigrants coming into South Africa. Now, on this slide, you can see how the signage in District 9, separating humans from non-humans, parallels signage during apartheid that separated blacks from whites. Knowing the context of production informs our reading of the narrative. We're encouraged to read the themes and scenarios in District 9 as being not that far off what's happened and is still happening in the real world. You'll notice that I used the meta-language of film to discuss the text, construction and meaning. I showed the multimodal quality of the film by discussing visual, audio and written elements, including mise-en-scène, camera techniques, dialogue and written text. In that short scene, there were plenty of multimodal features I could draw upon. District 9 may have been produced over a decade ago, but the themes are as relevant today as they were back in 2009. Now fast forward to 2020, and we see similar instances of xenophobia in society and politics. We're witnessing it in relation to the violation of the basic human rights of refugees. And more recently, we've seen it in the verbal and physical attacks on people of certain racial backgrounds at the height of hysteria around COVID-19. What District 9 does in a really clever way is to illuminate how the other is dehumanized and vilified by the dominant society. The film takes racial differences to the next level by making its minority group a non-human species or a non-human race. In critiquing the ideology of apartheid, we can see how the film performs important social and cultural work. What I'd like to do now is summarise the main takeaways of this lecture, as well as provide additional tips for studying multimodal texts and preparing for exam scenarios. So here's an extract from the summary report of the 2019 ATAR English course examination for English. Students are reminded to read and deconstruct questions carefully and craft responses that focus on the specific demands of the selected question. Candidates should resist the temptation to include detail about studied or unseen texts that is not required for the purposes of the question at hand. The foremost tip I have for you is answer the question at hand. Have you identified and addressed all the keywords in the question? In exams, it's really easy to forget these keywords because of the high-pressure situation. But remember, a shorter response that answers the question will get you more marks than a longer response that doesn't. It's not about the quantity of words on the paper, but the quality of what you've written. Being able to answer the question at hand shows the reader, whether it's your teacher or examiners, that you have good comprehension skills and can undertake the task that is being asked of you. Plan before you start writing. You need a roadmap of your short answer, response, or essay before you put pen to paper. A plan allows you to write with purpose and direction. This is a vital step that you cannot afford to skip. Planning will force you to formulate a cohesive and compelling argument. Focus on analysis and explanation, rather than retelling a plot or describing an image. Approach multimodal texts using a two-step process. So step 1, explain the meaning of the text. Step 2, show your understanding of how and why you arrived at that meaning. To do that, you need to demonstrate your awareness of the construction of a text, specifically the language features and generic conventions. Use the terminology in those tables I provided you earlier. They are the tools that will help you get the job done. Show an understanding of how context is vital to making sense of a text. Be selective and keep to relevant details, so avoid a checklist of filmic techniques and terms. Closely study specific scenes in films so that you can write about their meaning and construction in detail. And the last tip, prepare and practice, practice, practice. Go over the Year 12 English syllabus and exams from previous years, and all of those are freely available online. Past exam papers will give you an idea of the sorts of texts and questions that students have been asked to write about in the past. Have a go at the previous exam questions in your own time. You can also access summary reports from last year's exam, where there is also advice to students. You need to practice using the meta-language of multimodal texts so that you are comfortable with them. For example, you don't want to be using mise en scène for the very first time in an exam. Have a go at it in your assignments in class first. The more practice you do, the better and faster you'll become, and the more sophisticated your responses will be. So pick a random TV ad, or a poster on a bus stop shelter, or an interesting photograph you've found. Follow that two-step process I mentioned earlier, and practice applying the terminology. So to get you started, here's a couple of multimodal texts for you to analyse the meaning and construction of in your own time. Or perhaps you can do it with your peers and teachers. You could apply some of the questions from previous year's exams to write sample responses. So the first image is the official poster for the film Us, directed by Jordan Peele in 2019. The second image is a photograph taken by Hugh Brown of an Indonesian miner in a volcanic vent. And the last image is the book cover of Needs Improvement by John Paul Fiorentino, which was published in 2013. So that wraps up the lecture. Feel free to rewatch it, as you'll no doubt pick up on things that you didn't catch previously. And on that note, I wish you all the very best of luck with the rest of your studies this year, and also for your future endeavours. Study hard, stay positive, and stay safe. Thank you.